Hey there. I know I'm a little late to the party on this one, but there's one thing you can count on. It's for me to be late. So here we are. Uh, where I'm from, there's not a ton of comic shops around. So I only just recently finally finished reading the Spider-Punk miniseries that came out. Because I read all my comic books through the Marvel Unlimited app, and, they drip feed you issues. So, rightfully so, but they do. So, anyways, I did just recently finally finish reading this series, and I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to talk about it because I've been wanting a Spider-Punk series for so long, and for so long I was like, why isn't there a Spider-Punk series? Noir gets miniseries, 2099 has a run. He just, to me, always felt like really untapped potential. This is a great character, why doesn't he have a run? So when they announced he was getting a run, I was both excited and kind of disappointed. I was excited because finally Spider-Punk is getting a run. I was disappointed because, it's just a mini-series. But either way, I was still, pretty excited. So, yeah, I finally got around to finishing it, and now I got things to say. Obviously, you already know how I feel about the series just by looking at the title down below, but I know on the internet you just can't go around saying things suck without explaining your reasoning. I mean, you can, but you're that kind of guy. Nobody wants to be that kind of guy. You might even be that guy and you don't realize it. The biggest issue with Spider-Punk is that the story it wants to tell is way too big for the amount of issues it has to tell it. That and the dialogue is just all over the place. That, plain and simple, that's the issue with the series. The first thing that really kind of caught me off guard, was a little weird as far as the writing goes, was that Hobie despises the name Spider-Punk. He hates it. He doesn't like it. And within the span of just a few of the opening panels of issue number 1, he's suddenly cool with it. He's like, yeah, I guess I'm coming around to it. When it's like I said, notoriously, he has loathed that name. And now, like I said, within the span of just a few panels, he's cool with it. It just feels like that should have happened through the course of the whole series. Like, that should have been sort of like a character growth for him. I understand the title is Spider-Punk for the sake of marketing and ease of recognition of how he's different. So I don't have an issue with him being called Spider-Punk. I have the issue with sort of just flagrantly having him suddenly accept that is his name. So like I said, I feel like that should have been something that happened throughout the course of the book. By issue 5, that's when he should have finally had this moment of I'm Spider-Punk. That's me. I'm that guy. Instead of kind of, like I said, accepting it within the first 3 panels. So jumping over to the writing, which is honestly my biggest issue with the series as a writer myself, it just feels so disjointed and sort of jumbled and incohesive. For example, you'll have a character saying lit, and that's fire, rad, sick, all these sort of different phrases that span generations of, youth culture, but none of them will be specific to one character. Kamala won't represent say the way that say Gen Z speaks, and Punk might represent the way that Gen X would speak. It's just a grab bag. They just use whatever words or phrases that have been used by youth culture, for across all generations, and it just creates this lack of identity. And none of the phrases that they choose for these characters to use, I should say most of the phrases don't feel representative of the punk community either. Now, I'm not a huge punk guy. I played in a rock band for about a little over a decade, and I was more of a scene kid and like an emo kid. But even then, none of like the phrases really that being said, other than the word grody, was I like that. Yeah, that reminds me of my youth playing in those bands and being in that scene. Another big sort of red flag for me about how poorly written the dialogue is that there's a group of characters that are speaking Japanese the entire time. But there's zero indication that they are speaking Japanese. The only sort of indication that they are in fact speaking Japanese is several like pages later where suddenly they use the word baka, which makes no sense because everything else is written in English, and baka literally just means stupid or moron. And so it doesn't come off as like competent writing. Like it comes off as like, let's do a meme, you know, like let's appeal to the youth. Like it just doesn't make any sense. It's just so weird. It's just weird because like you should have just written stupid or moron. You didn't need to write baka. Like doesn't make any sense. So you know what I mean? It just feels like it's trying to appeal to like youth culture, like, haha, baka, isn't that cringe? And it's like, yeah, you made this look real cringe. When somebody who is Japanese, or even in anime, when they say baka, it's not always this big cringy thing. It can be taken seriously. So again, it just feels so like out of touch. And even going off that a bit further, it's probably, I think it's that same page as when Hobie reveals that they've been speaking Japanese this entire friggin' time. So there's absolutely no way, or at least there wasn't for me, to have known that these characters were even speaking another language. I was just like, oh, okay. And then suddenly there was baka, and I was like, why is that person saying baka suddenly? Like, that's weird. And then Hobie's like, mentioned something about them speaking Japanese, and it's like, oh, so they've been speaking this the whole time? Well, that makes baka sound even dumber. Like, that makes it feel even more like poor writing. So yeah, my biggest point about the dialogue is it feels like a bunch of like 30-year-olds trying to write these teenage characters, and it's bad. It's bad. To me, that's exactly how it reads. I don't read it and feel like these are authentic teenage characters. I read it and feel like this is a bunch of 30-year-olds who sat in a room and were like, how do teenagers talk? And have no freaking clue. Because that's the only way I can explain why there's several different generations of like slang being used willy-nilly with zero association to specific characters. And, you know, it doesn't work. It's bad. It's bad. I know I'm harping on the dialogue a lot, but that's one of the few kind of huge things that you have as a comic book, like your dialogue, that's important, and when you fumble it so monumentally, it doesn't matter how cool like the concept of the story is and how good the artwork is, because the artwork is gorgeous, and some of the character redesigns are fantastic. Some of them are kind of fall flat a little bit and are kind of but it's good. But when your dialogue is so freaking bad, it's kind of hard to enjoy the other aspects. So jumping into like the specifics of why the story feels too big for its short run. One of the issues that really stood out to me, or kind of exemplifies this, is issue number 3, which is where the Spider Band gets broken down in Philly. At least I think that's the whole reason. It gets broken down in Philly, and they meet Matea, a.k.a. Daredevil. And in this issue that we learn that the Kingpin has taken over Philly and has had control of it for years. And he has established that he is very powerful, and he has very competent villains working under him that has made it like impossible to topple his reign. And then, in the span of this one issue, seemingly effortlessly, Hobie, I think it's Kamala, and Matea topple him, take him out. Very little effort, in fact. And it feels so fast. It feels like this should have been a mini-series in itself to have toppled him. But no, it's one issue is all it takes. And it just feels too fast. It feels so rushed. Also in this issue, Gwen gets name dropped because she too is a drummer, just like Matea is. And I thought that was cool that they had Hobie did that. That being said, when Hobie suggests a band name that they should have, they come up with the name they come up with is the Daredevils, which is absolutely horrible. It sounds like something that Hobie of yesteryear would have called corny. But instead, he's like, yo, that's actually fire. And it's bad. Issue 3 overall is kind of a mess. It's the overall idea, again, very cool, but then the moment-to-moment execution is really messy and kind of lackluster. In fact, and also it's weird because Captain America and Riri stay with the van to protect the van, which is okay, that's cool, but it feels like it's only done to create a struggle for the other three when they go to fight Kingpin. But then there's no struggle. They manage it just fine. Like, and again, it's like, how is this guy a threat? It's not good. It's not good. Overall, the story is good. I love the road trip motif. That's cool. Ties in. That's great. I also really love how in issue number 1, they establish just how different Hobie is from Peter. He is not a genius by any means. Any of the technical work is all Riri, which is great. And Riri I found very likable, and I really enjoyed Riri in this series. But yeah, it establishes very quickly that Hobie is not Peter in sort of like any sense at all. He has his crew, the Spider Band, and that is sort of how he gets things done. Even if he wasn't in this sort of even if he didn't exist in this sort of like fascist world, it feels very much like Hobie would still have the Spider Band. Like, he would still be leaning on the Spider Band for things. Even though one of the big sort of character arcs that they try to hammer home is that Hobie is very independent and he does try to take everything on himself. And I guess in some regard he does, but it just feels very messy. The writing just feels very messy because like they're saying like, oh, Hobie, you don't have to shoulder the burden alone. You don't have to do this alone. But it's like, but Hobie's been actively showing that he doesn't take on this thing alone. So it's very weird to have sort of like them to like write Hobie as if he's trying to shoulder all this burden while simultaneously he very welcomes the help from people. So it is a little weird. But maybe you could see that more of he beats himself down when things don't work. The series ends on a pretty solid high note, I would say. The last issue is 90% fighting, which is fine. Though I will say that a lot of the other sort of fighting in the series is resolved rather quickly and, like I said, without too much effort, aside from the fight that starts with Taskmaster in issue 1 and then ends in issue 2. That feels a little more like dragged out. It feels like they had a lot more of a harder time with Taskmaster and Kraven the Hunter than they did with Kingpin, which again is why I say that issue 3 and overall the story just feels kind of like a mess. Anyways, so talking about sort of how it ends. Issue number 5 opens with the crew about to be publicly executed. Norman and his crew. Norman somehow having survived being decapitated, which I don't hate this idea. I guess the idea is that the symbiote has kept him alive even though he is just a head. It does very much give
Somehow Palpatine returned.
vibes. Like, that's how sloppy it kind of feels. So anyways, they are all set to be executed. They're like, I don't know how we're going to get out of this. When suddenly both Hulk and Daredevil show up to save them. And I honestly forgot Hulk was even in the series. Because he shows up in issue 2 as a human and then gets left behind to watch and like safeguard the base. But now he is suddenly all the way across the country.
Hey, so I'm a fucking idiot. I forget the location of Washington, D.C., I'll be honest with you, and I didn't realize that it was only 5 hours from Manhattan, New York, so, that's my bad. You can blame the American education system if you want, but I'm also just bad at geography. It is what it is. That being said, a lot of my feelings on this still kind of remain the same. It does still feel kind of very random and out of the blue that Hulk and Mattea just happened to show up, but I did want to acknowledge that I was completely fucking wrong. Okay.
Washington, D.C., and it came out of friggin' nowhere. It was just like, oh, Hulk is here, and Mattea is here. It just... it feels so out of left field that it's just lazy. Like, it is the easiest way that they could have taken to get the characters out of that situation, if that makes sense. It was just like, crap, we rode them up into this execution. How the crap, how do we get them out of it? And it's like, well, Hulk could get them out of it. And overall, the final fight, while clearly there's a bit of a struggle and it's better written than, again, the fight with Kingpin, in some ways it doesn't feel like the crew has much more trouble once Hulk arrives than they did with Taskmaster in issue 1, if that makes sense. Like, Riri takes down Sentry via some random hacking that, like, isn't even explained. Like, it's never, like, established that she can remote hack anybody, at least to my knowledge, and then suddenly she has hacked Sentry's suit and takes control of it for herself and just wrecks them. And it's so random, and that's like kind of the whole fight, and a lot of, I guess, the overall issues is just, it's like, how do we get them out of it? And they just make up some random thing out of nowhere. Does any of this make any sense? So, like, we end up with just Osborn being left, who is wrecking shop, and they are having issues with. He's shooting energy blasts from the suit of armor that he has, and Hobie's like, I have no clue how I'm supposed to beat him. And Riri's like, through the power of rock, or whatever, like you did before. And she takes his guitar and just plugs it into her suit of armor, which now suddenly has, like, amp capabilities. On top of, she has somehow also taken control of Norman's army of armored goons and uses them to also amplify. And it feels so random. Like, they're all just equipped with speaker systems, and like, I hate to be that guy, but even the ending is just so freaking lazy. Hobie beats Norman in the exact same fashion that he beat him before. Like, it's just there's more steps. That's all it is. It just is more steps. It's just not good. I don't know if it's just because people are starved for good diversity or something new, so we got the series and we're like, yeah, that's solid, but it's not good. It's bad. So yeah, Spider-Punk's bad. And it's weird to me that nobody else is sort of talking about that, or has talked about that. It's just not good. Like I said, there's a lot of great ideas, but they're crammed down to such a small window in which they have to explore them that everything feels rushed and just messy and lazy. It's anytime there's an issue, it's just like, make something random up, whether it makes sense or not, and then the issue is solved. And it's a shame because Marvel is so afraid to like invest in anything new and like refreshing. They just continually rehash the same stuff, and so it sucks. It sucks that it's not as good as it should be. It should be an ongoing series. It is an interesting universe. There are interesting characters. It's aesthetically it's cool. There's so much there to like want. It's bad. You're bad. I'm sorry. I want you to be good. I do. Ugh. So that's gonna be it for me, guys. Have you read the Spider-Punk series? What do you think of it? Like I said, everybody seems to really love it, and I don't get it. To me, it just reads really bad. It just nothing. There's so little about it that's good, in my opinion. It feels kind of like Star Wars. The general idea is fantastic and great, but then the moment-to-moment execution is just lackluster and lazy and a mess. So, would love to know what you guys think down below. Do you love it? Do you have a counterpoint? I'd love to hear it, because like I said, from what I can tell, everybody loves this thing, and I don't get it. If you'd like me to check out more miniseries and review them here on the channel, let me know down below. Subscribe, hit that bell icon if you want to see me rant and rave for however long I've been doing this. And I gotta go sit down and drink some water, because I am